Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the EmpowerUp podcast. In this episode, we bring on special guest Catherine York, who's actually a QA specialist at Gearbox in Texas. Now, Catherine brings a very interesting perspective to the podcast. She's obviously a professional and is really good at what she does, but she also brings up the issue of mental health, especially as it pertains to the gaming and entertainment industries. So you guys are really in for a treat. She gives you guys kind of her suggestions on how you can better deal with taking care of yourself in the industry, as well as how to look out for your team members and to make sure you have a very positive and cohesive work environment. Special guest for us. I'm not as familiar with her. Katie, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? She was introduced to me through Steve Meehan.
Cut out on my end, sorry. My name's Katie York. I am currently working at Gearbox as a QA tester, but I graduated from UT Dallas with a degree in arts and technology, primarily focusing in 3D art, 3D level design. But I also am working on being a concept artist, so I'm constantly pushing towards that effort.
Cool. And
Awesome.
You know what? Can you guys catch me up a little bit? I think Steve's told me this, but how did you two first get in touch?
We actually hilariously got in touch with one of the new hires that we just got over at Gearbox. I was putting out a feeler on LinkedIn, as many people do, and I was like, hey, if anybody's hiring concept artists, I'm here, and I'm ready to work or anything like that. And I was like, I'm looking for any advice, any tips, any portfolio reviews, anything. I'm here for it all. And then Steven ended up getting tagged in a comment, and so I thought, you know what, who knows the industry a lot better than I do, so I went ahead and I sent a connection request. Steve's like, hey, nice to meet you, and we just started talking, and now we're it did a weird thing.
All right. Byron, are we coming through all right? I know we're just starting off. I'm having a little trouble with my connection.
Yeah, it was a little choppy for me as well. I mean, I can see you, but Katie, unfortunately, it was a little bit choppy during that last section of what she said.
Okay, would you like me to repeat?
Yeah, please. You said that you guys met on LinkedIn. You sent him a connection request.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I sent him a connection request on LinkedIn because he was someone who's in the industry, and one of my coworkers recommended him and everything like that in a comment on a LinkedIn post that I made. And so, yeah, I sent him a connection request, then he messaged me, and we just kind of chit-chatted here and there. He wanted to get to know me. I think the rest is kind of history. Now we're good friends. Awesome. At least I would like to think we're good friends.
I concur. I agree with that.
Okay, good.
And from my perspective, this is one of the things that I'm constantly looking for. Is my goal is to help people in their career paths, especially in video games. And I just put that feeler no matter where the hell that I go. So if I'm doing a talk at a school, or if I'm on LinkedIn, or if I'm chatting with friends, I just put that out there. And I know that naturally by me putting that message out there, the right people will come into my periphery somehow. And this is just a part of it, is me just being true to myself and what do I want to do, and then understanding that the right people will show up. And one of the things that I love about Katie is that we have been in very consistent contact over the past several months. And I know a lot of that is on her effort. She's the one who's hungry for knowledge. She's the one who's hungry to learn more. And not only does she have that hunger, but she's also putting it to use. And from somebody who wants to give guidance, that's very uplifting for me to know that my energy is being used in a positive way. And that's why I absolutely love chatting with Katie, because these things, there's a natural connection where we just the conversations flow effortless. But not only that, but I can sense how she's communicating with me, the things that she wants to do, and that I have from my experience, I can help her out. So it's just, these are the types of people that I'm looking for. So if you are out there and you are looking for a mentor, that's one of the things that you can do to make yourself be appealing to be mentored is take the stuff that you're learning, put it to use, and then let your mentor know how effective it's going to be. Because that's kind of like the feedback loop in video games, right? When you do something, you get the positive feedback. You want to keep doing it over and over again. So little bits of tips on if you're a mentor, that's something that you can do to find it. So thank you again, Katie, for being an awesome person and for joining us and for sharing your story on how you got into video games. And I know you mentioned that you are, that you studied in school and now you're a tester or working to be a concept artist professionally. Can you go a little bit more into detail, like what was your path to getting into industry? Like, where did it start?
Well, oh goodness. I guess starts same way everybody else is. We all love playing video games. We're all, really into that and everything like that. And actually, my path kind of started in high school. I actually created a video game with a couple of my friends, and they were in a BCIS class, and they were going to participate in a competition. And I was in an art history class at the time, and so they're like, "Hey, you can draw. Can you help us with the character design?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." And so, a couple hours a day, I would go down and I would drop the characters in Photoshop, and it was little 16-bit characters. So we were just doing like little sprite sheets and everything like that, and they put it all together and we won the competition, which is really, really neat. But hilariously, games didn't start for me. Like, I didn't realize that the game industry or game development was a thing until way later. I actually went to college to be a marine biologist. I wanted to study, fish and killer whale hunting patterns, and I wanted to study like regeneration cycles of like starfish and various other things. And then one day I just kind of lost faith in that. Not necessarily faith, but like love in that. And I got really bored. So I switched over to being an artist. And at that point in time, I thought I was only ever going to be a graphic artist. There was nothing else I could do in computers. And then someone's like, "Well, why not video games?" I was like, "What?" Like, yeah, someone has to make the things that you enjoy playing, right? And I was like, "Yes." And they're like, "Well, you can do that." I was like, "Well, what can I do? I'm just an artist." Like, "Oh, well, you could design the thing." I was like, "Oh yeah, someone does that." And so I actually transferred from Texas A&M Corpus Christi all the way up to UT Dallas, where they just opened up the A-Tech program. And unfortunately, I didn't have a concept art position tracked, so I ended up doing 3D environment. I really, really enjoyed that. I thought it was a lot of fun, but for whatever reason, after I got out of college, I just kind of fell out of love with it. It's not so much that I can't do it. It's just, again, it didn't capture my interest as much as creating characters and creating stories for these characters and, building up their world that way in a two-dimensional way. That really appealed to me. So after that, I just kind of kept pushing to try and find an industry job. I ended up getting a job at GameStop, which is, kind of one of those tried and true people in the game industry that'll have that particular job before they got into the industry. And I made friends and networked with a bunch of the people who were in the industry, but were regulars at my store. I had some friends from like from EA. And then I had some friends from Gearbox. And it came around that Gearbox was looking for QA. One of my friends ended up stopping by. He's like, "Hey, we're taking resumes. Can you hand me your resume? And because I know how much you want to get into the industry." And that was kind of history. Everything kind of mapped out really easily there. 2 weeks later, I had an interview. And then 2 weeks after that, I got the phone call saying, "Hey, you're hired at Gearbox." So I was like, I did a happy dance around the entire store. I was like gladly rearranging everything. And I was telling my manager, I was like, "That's it, I'm out. This is my 2 weeks. I'm going to Gearbox." He's like, "That's awesome." So yeah, a lot of it is, it kind of starts the same way as everybody else does. Just kind of realizing that video games is a thing that you can do.
I absolutely love that story. And one of the cool things in particular is, like, one, you surrounded yourself in video games, like getting a job at GameStop, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, what going into GameStop, what was your thought process? Like, how did you see that playing out beforehand? Like, did you know that it was going to lead into video games, or like, did you think you were just going to go into retail? What was that like?
So my overall goal was to get into video games. Actually, GameStop has a little game studio that kind of helps publish other studios' games. So the game Deformers comes out of that studio. A couple other games came out of that studio as well. And my track was to do my job very, very well to the point where they're going to want to keep me, which I did very well, because in 3 weeks after working there, GA to a assistant manager, and then I got in so well that when we had corporate come around and do checks, I was like, hey, and they're like, hey, well, are you wanting to stay in GameStop? What do you want to do? I was like, I want to be in the game industry. I was like, I would, really like to be in the game industry, or, kind of continue on with my art career. And they're like, okay, cool. So send us your resume and your portfolio. I was like, all right. So I sent my resume and my portfolio, and hilariously, actually, my very last day working at GameStop, my district manager came in. He's like, hey, I just wanted to come and tell you that corporate thought you were so awesome that they made a graphic artist position for you for GameStop.
Wow.
I was like, well, I'm going to Gearbox. And he's like, do that. I was like, yeah. So, but my mindset was to get into the industry anyway, anyhow. Less than a year, I made it.
That's awesome. And one of the things that I also love is that with your career at GameStop, you came into contact with people that worked in the industry, and you built relationships with them. And like, can you take us a little more in depth into how did that all play out? Like, was it, oh, hey, you found out these customers work at Gearbox and you're automatic, like, I want to get a job there. Can you help me get a job? Or like, what was that like for you?
I didn't do that, mostly because I feel like that happens. Anybody who's in the industry, they get approached by somebody who's like, oh my God, you're in the industry, help me get into the industry. And like, they're just like fervent and rabid and feral. And I would approach someone who's actually you're famous, I'm gonna respect you, but hey, let's just talk about games. And so that's what I did. I was alone by myself a lot at the store that I was at, because I was the assistant manager and I had the most available hours. And so what I ended up doing is I would just shoot the shit. I would just talk games with everybody. I got asked, oh, hey, from my friend who worked at Gearbox, like, oh, hey, what did you think of Battleborn? And I would tell him my honest opinion. I was like, hey, I didn't really like this part because, hey, the color similarities were just really bad and it gave me a headache, or, all this other stuff. Yay, I think it was mostly their marketing team that would come in, and so we would talk about any of the new games that are coming out for EA, and they would ask my opinion on what I thought about their marketing, or if anybody would like any of these, like, the free little gifts that come along with pre-ordering a game. I was like, that's really cool. That's nice. That's neat. That's cool. I don't like that. I think that looks terrible. And so I would just be very honest, very open, but, they would occasionally ask me, hey, so, do you want to stay at GameStop? I'm like, no, I want to be in the game industry. And I was like, if you happen to hear anything, let me know, and I'll definitely apply. But I never really, fervently held onto their wrist and be like, tell me when you're applying, tell me now, because I don't think that's fair, and I don't think that's nice. That's one of the things that, it's kind of like meeting someone that you don't know and then expecting so much from them, and then just taking so much from them. And I don't think that's fair, because they've worked so hard to get to where they are, and to take more from them for that, and then I'll just kind of not honor the fact that, hey, they are human too. They have a 9 to 5. Maybe they don't want to talk about work all the time. It's just one of the things. It's like common courtesy. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, I absolutely love that, and I'm curious, how did your training at GameStop help you with that? Because that sounds like it's a very customer service, people-oriented type of approach. Is that something that you learned at GameStop, or is that something that you even beforehand?
It's actually kind of something I've just been ingrained with. My dad's always been like, hey, he's always taught me, hey, people have lives outside of the moment that you interact with them. And so treat everybody with kindness and respect. And, if you can't find a common ground with them, that's okay. That's fine. Just, be nice. And that's something that I've carried through for the entirety of my life. And my grandmother has taught me that too. And she's been a very huge influence in my life. But so it's not something that GameStop taught me, mostly because a lot of the stuff that GameStop taught me were things that I already knew and were pretty common things across retail. But just kind of keeping in mind that people have their own struggles, have their own lives outside of everything, and that they're people, and they have hearts, they have brains, they have lungs, and they want to do fun things, and they don't always want to constantly do it.
That's awesome. That is, wow. I'm just enjoying hearing the story. Sounds like you have a great deal of empathy, and
Yes,
I'm willing to bet that the people that saw you in the store, like the EA, right? Like, they've like Steve likes to say, like, I'm gonna be spending 40 hours with this person. I'm sure that you exude the kind of personality that someone would love to hang out with. Like, that's kind of
Man, I hope so.
That's the vibe that I'm immediately getting from you. Like, this is my first interaction with you, and that's already pretty evident to me. So I can see how you got into Gearbox, and even literally they liked you enough to create a position for you at GameStop as a graphic artist. So that's amazing.
Compliment. So thank you so very much.
So I'm curious, like, your journey. You mentioned going from GameStop, and then now you're a QA specialist. So your experience testing video games for people that want to break into QA as their like stepping stone into the industry, what are things that you would recommend for people to do that?
I would say just apply. I've had a lot of people actually recently who've applied, and they would reach out to me saying, "Hey, can you tell me about the culture at Gearbox? Can you tell me, if this is someplace that I'd actually really like to work?" And personally, I really appreciate that, because not to like say anything about it, but like I would like to know somebody before I feel like I can recommend them. And a lot of it is because, I don't want to stick my neck out for someone random without getting to know them. So when I get the occasional conversation with people and they're like, "Hey, you work at Gearbox, can you tell me about the culture?" Instead of immediately, "Hey, you work at Gearbox, tell me about the jobs. Tell me about the position that you're hiring for. Please let me know exactly what I need to do in order to get this job." Because I don't hire. I don't have the ability to hire. And so kind of having an open mind about contacting people in like QA and stuff like that, being like, "Hey, you may not be able to sway the vote, but if you could tell me, even if this is a place that I'd like to work at, that'd be great." And that always sets a good tone for anybody who you're talking to, so because it makes them want to actually put your name in a hat. Like, I know there are a couple of people that have recently got hired that like comes like, "Hey, are we talking to this person? Are we, like, I don't need to know if we're hiring them, but like they seem like a nice person." I'm just saying, and little things like that, little acts of empathy, little acts of, yes, talking about work, but, not talking about give me the job. Talking about like, "Hey, is this something that you enjoy? Hey, is this something that you would recommend?" It really means a lot to people, because you're asking what their opinion is and how they feel when they work. And, not every place is like going to be the great place, and there's going to be ups and downs and stuff like that. So you may catch someone on a bad day, but at the same time, like, you can get an honest feedback of like where to work or anything like that. I would always say though, apply. Even if it's just a general application, I would always say apply, and then like reach out to somebody who's in a position that you're looking at and be like, "Hey, what's it like working there? Is it fun? Do you enjoy it? Do you really like working there?" And then you'll always get honest responses, and you'll just, if you thank them for their time and like, "Hey, I'd like to keep in contact with you, so hopefully we can be, friends in the future," or anything like that, that always sets a good tone.
I absolutely love that. And having been in QA myself, spending 5 years being a professional tester, and knowing that there, not only do we spend at least 40 hours a week, but sometimes like 80 plus hours a week when during crunch time or during right before a game gets released. Like, can you really stand somebody's personality? And like there's so many parts to it. It's not just like, do you get along with them, but what's their work ethic like, right? Because there are people that we like hanging around, but job done, you're like, maybe I want to go with somebody else. So I'm curious, in your perspective, what are the qualities that it takes to be a good tester?
In order to be a good tester, I think you really have to kind of understand exactly what QA testing is. Yes, you do get to play the game. You get to play the game all day, every day for the next 40 years. As long as there's support for a game, you will be playing the game. In my personal experience, I think being able to constantly be okay with playing the same content over and over and over and over and over and over and over again is something that you have to keep in mind. I also think that being understanding of, everybody's emotional stressors over time would be really, really helpful as well. Just because, again, you go through the fluctuations of early development, and then you have the crunch time before the game gets released and anything like that. And that puts a lot of stress on people. And so realizing that, hey, you may not be the problem, something else may be the problem, is very, very important. But overall, for me specifically, it's just being a hard worker. Making sure that, yes, you come in with a good attitude and everything like that is very important, but also making sure that, you're not complaining every 5 minutes. I don't want to do this. I don't want to test this. I don't want to do that. That brings the energy of the entire office down. And it can negatively impact the entire experience of being a tester. So you can have a really, really good group of testers, but you get one person who's like, I don't want to do this. This is lame. This is boring. I'd rather do this. It makes it all slog, and it makes the day seem longer, and no one really starts having fun. But if you joke around, you have a good personality, well, not necessarily a good personality, you can have a bad personality and be funny or something, I don't know. But as long as, you're not bringing that negativity to work, it really helps. And definitely being just very open to criticism. Not necessarily wholly negative criticism, just criticism that is used to make you grow. If you approach training, especially in QA, as like, I already know everything. I've looked at X amount of bugs on this game or X amount of bugs on this, and I don't think that's great. You've seen them, but did you report them? Do you know how to report them correctly? And, sometimes depending on which studio, I'm sure, you work at, there's different ways that they'll say certain things or different verbiages that everybody uses. And as long as you're okay with open communication and all that, what's the word? All the input that you're going to get as soon as you start working there, you'll be fine. But yeah, just hard worker, making sure you're staying not necessarily energetic, but positive as much as you can. And then, just making sure that you're open to criticism. I think that's always a good idea.
I have a question related to that. So I know concept art is what you want to do. How was the transition going into game testing? Because I'm an artist myself, right? Like, I'm a musician, so I imagine that dealing with a lot of clients in art probably translated pretty well to what you're doing now from what you're saying. Does that seem pretty accurate, or what would you say?
Actually, retail seems to work out a lot better for me for the QA work that I do as opposed to the artwork that I do. Because I do have commissions and stuff like that, but I don't deal with that as much on a day-to-day basis as I would with retail. So honestly, the differences between QA and like concept art and art in general are kind of different in a way. But it's mostly just because I'm separating them myself. Because if I equate art to QA, I will start like getting into workaholic mode, and I'll just go and go and go and go and then burn out. But yeah, no, QA is actually it's very similar to retail, in which you are presented with a problem and you need to either report the problem. Not either, where you need to report the problem and explain how that problem occurs, and then not necessarily solve the problem, but be able to provide information so the problem can be solved. So it's very similar to retail in that way.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
One of the things that I wanted to ask is, like, one of the problems of getting a job in the industry is, like, sometimes for entry levels, they'll put, you need experience, like 2 years of experience to get an entry-level position, right? And one of the things that I like to talk about is how to get experience without having to be hired for the job. So, for example, like, if you're going to be applying for a job as a tester, like, there are things that you can do in the real world where you get testing experience, where you can find software, find problems with them, and write bugs. Like, what advice would you give to an aspiring tester and how they can kind of get an idea of what it's like to write bugs without being hired on yet? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I actually highly recommend looking at your favorite video game. Because every video game out there has just 1 or 2, 3, 4, 500 bugs. No, I'm joking. But there will be some video games that will have continuing bugs that will just be in there. And I'm not saying hunt them down or anything like that, but when you do come across them, I would kind of sit down and analyze how you would describe this to someone. The best way I would do it is this same way I would teach anybody, is like, explain it to me as if I were a 5-year-old. Not that I'm saying anybody is of low intelligence or anything like that, but the thing is, if you can explain it to somebody who would understand at the age of 5, they would actually be able to understand what's going on. So my favorite video game is Horizon Zero Dawn, and I found a lot of issues where, like, Aloy will just clip into mountains. And it's just because she's running into the collision of the mountains. And how I would describe a bug like that is, hey, at this specific location, goodness, I don't even remember which mountain it was. At this specific location, if you run into the mountain right next to this sign, Aloy will clip into the mountain. And if you die there, you get stuck, or anything like that. And in order to fix the problem, or work around the problem, you can actually back out to the main menu and then re-enter, and it should work that way. But I would take a look at your favorite video games, and I would kind of slowly work through them, because as nice as it is to speedrun a game and complete a game, when you go slow, you start noticing a lot more issues over time. And it's kind of like a slow and steady wins the race situation. So if you take your favorite video game, slowly play through it. And if you see any bugs, kind of just think about how you would describe that to somebody.
I absolutely love that. And, like, one of the questions that I've gotten is, like, when I advise somebody to find bugs in their favorite games and then document them, I mentioned to them that may be something that you can put on your resume as, like, I found 100 bugs in Horizon Zero Dawn, I've documented them, and I've written it down, and here they are. Like, as a professional tester, would you take that into account when looking at somebody that you would recommend?
If I was hiring, I would definitely take a look at that. I wouldn't necessarily read all of them, but I would look at a couple of them and see how well they would be able to articulate. Because the biggest thing about being in QA is being able to articulate clearly and concisely what the issue is. So yeah, I would definitely take a look at that. I think that would be very, very impressive, just because that is somebody wanting to take the initiative, wanting to be in this industry and is serious about it, and is not just like, I want to play games all day. Just someone who really cares about what they're doing and what they want to do. I think that would be a very good idea. Now, I'm not saying you need to print out 100 pieces of paper with $100. And I don't think you should send it in with your resume, but when you get the interview, if you bring it along, I think that's a good idea. I know I ended up bringing a paper that I wrote for a temp playtester position that I had done. And I was like, they asked me about my opinion about this thing. And so these are the things that I thought. Ta-da! So it was like a 2-page paper, and it was very well thought out. And I was like, hey, Horizon Zero Dawn is my favorite game, and awesome, and it's wonderful, and I love it. But there's this one particular thing, if you're going to be able to let, people choose between like a stealth mechanic or a more aggressive mechanic, that, you kind of need to let some of the stealth mechanic people have a place to hide in the cauldrons. And I'm just like, you need to figure that out. But other than that, like, that's kind of something that I was really, really proud of. And so I brought that with me to my interview. I don't remember if I pulled it out because that was 4 years ago. But yeah.
Man, that's awesome. That's really cool. I love how you really think about that kind of thing. So I know with my company, we're all kind of QA testers because I work at a startup, and that's just kind of the nature of the business. So being able to clearly articulate what you want concisely and basically leaving no guesswork on their part, man, that really does go a long way. So I think that's excellent advice that you've given in that sense, and bringing that into the interview, making sure you can really break down what you're doing. And also, I never thought about the idea of like just playing through the game slowly. You actually will notice more bugs. I'm actually going to try that out myself and see what I think, because like Sonic's my favorite series, so I think that's something that I could probably go through slowly and pick some stuff out.
Yeah. And now I have Rolling Around at the Speed of Sound stuck in my head.
Oh yeah, got places to go. Yeah, yep. Oh yes, Sonic Adventure 2. Oh,
you're welcome, everyone.
Thank you. I'm gonna listen to that after this now.
And speaking of that, I know that in my experience as a tester, one of the challenges that I had was being able to put up with, like you had mentioned before, just doing things repetitively over and over and over again. Like being a tester, I remember like running into walls as a character, just looking for collision. Yep. I remember things like playing through stages so much that like I would hear the music playing in my head even when the game was turned off, or I would close my eyes and I would still see the game playing with my eyes closed.
Or in the middle of the night, you have those scary fever dreams of like dying 14 times because you're looking for, the kill plane or something.
Exactly. So how did you manage to overcome some of those challenges as a tester? Because I know like doing those things repetitively can drive a normal person insane. So what are you doing to help you out with that?
My secret cap, I'm insane. No, I'm joking. So for me, a lot of the times is a lot with early testing. Sometimes audio isn't in yet, so I listen to a ton of music. And if it's not music, I'm watching travel vlogs or I'm watching food vlogs, something to kind of like where I can focus, but I still have something going on in the background to where I'm not just like going insane. And it's really, really helpful. Now, of course, later on in development, when more things get finished, you can't do that as much. And so in order to do that, I generally would like to work with somebody else, because then we just banter back and forth. Like we talk and chit chat. Oh, how was your night? How was your day? And it's a really great way to get to know your coworkers, and a really great way to get to kind of like befriend them. I guess is what I'm trying to say. But yeah, at some point it does get very monotonous and very tiring. And it's okay to be like, hey, I need a 15-minute break. I need a brain break. I'm either stressed out, I'm tired, I'm anxious. I need to take a break. So I think for me, I am one of those people who gets up and just goes for 4, 5, 6 hours. But there are a couple people that, I've worked with, and like, hey, can we take like a short 5-10 minute break? And I was like, perfectly fine. And I'm totally cool with that, because taking care of your mental health is very important in this industry, because we have to produce a game. We have to get a game out there, and it's a game that everybody's so excited about. Even if it's 5 people or it's 5,000 people, someone is excited about the game that you're going to be putting out once it gets announced. And I think keeping in mind that you respect yourself as much as you respect the thousands or 5 fans, I think it was very important. So making sure that you take appropriate breaks, making sure that you take a good amount of time and just listen to your body, listen to yourself, and just take care of yourself while you're doing that. And there are times, hey, I'm stuck on this project. I need to get it done, but I'm so tired. Coffee always works. But I don't use it as a crutch.
I love that you touched on the mental health aspect of working in games and how that impacts the work environment. Because in my experience, like, somebody can be like a hard worker, but if they're not taking care of themselves outside of work, that can impact how they operate on a day-to-day basis, and that can, like, those emotions can be contagious and infect other people around them. What are some of the things that you do to help make sure that you and your coworkers are doing well, just health-wise, both physically, mentally, emotionally, all across the board? Honestly,
I do mental health checks with all of my coworkers, whether they realize it or not. Like, I always, almost every single morning, I said, "Good morning," and then I ask how everybody's doing. And then after lunch, "I hope you guys had a good lunch. What'd you guys eat?" I'll crack jokes. I make the most terrible jokes, so don't ask me to do it. But I'll crack jokes and I'll goof off occasionally. I listen to a lot of K-pop, and so I'll just send them random things every once in a while. I was like, "Oh, hey, did you guys see this new thing that came out?" And like, sharing things about yourself and with other people, or sharing things that people would be excited about with them, is a good way to kind of like not necessarily take their mind off the task at hand, but it takes their mind off of any negative feelings that they have during the day or anything like that, and then just constantly checking in with people and seeing how they're doing. For myself, for me, it's just making sure that I don't go stir crazy. I don't necessarily like the work from home thing since quarantine started, but I respect it because I want everybody to be healthy and I want everybody to be happy and come all back together again. So for me, especially at home, it is a lot of, occasionally me getting up to go snuggle with my dog, or to mess with our new bird, who is literally chaos incarnate, and she's hilarious. Or, if I'm at work, it's to turn around and like take a quick breather and like chit chat with a couple of the coworkers that are actually at the office. And then sometimes it's just getting up and walking around. And honestly, that's probably the best thing that you can do for yourself, is get some fresh air, drink some water, make sure you hydrate. Hydrating is very important. And just getting some physical motion, because we sit in our chairs for 8 to 12 hours a day, and making sure that we, get some movement into our body is really important. And it kind of helps reset yourself as well as re-energize yourself as well. Coffee, again, always helps, but again, don't use it as a crutch.
I love that. And I know personally, one of the things that I did was help take lessons that I learned from games themselves and try to implement those mechanics into my work. So for example, when I was a tester, we used to test the loading of teams into stages. So we tested a game called NBA The Life, right? And we had to test every single team combination going into every single stadium. And that's one of those repetitive tasks that's just like brutal. Like, you're not even playing the game. You're literally selecting 2 teams, putting them into a stadium, making sure it loads. Once it does, you reset the console and do it again. Yeah, so one of the things that I did is I made a game out of that myself. Mm-hmm. So I challenged myself, how fast can I do this test case and how fast can I do all of the combinations? And that opened it up to like, okay, well, I need to work on more stations at one time. So I commandeered an entire like 20 stations, and I had all of the loads going up.
Weren't you?
Exactly. So I'm curious, like as a gamer, like are there any ways that you've implemented like game design techniques or gamification into work to help you perform better?
Oh, I've definitely done that. I am not the console cart person. That is reserved for somebody else at my office. But I am constantly like, can I load into X thing and not die? Can I load into do this? Can I do this? Can I do this? Can I do like it's kind of like quick rapid fire stuff that you can do real quickly in order to get things done. But whereas like it's anything more complicated, it's where you slow down and you take your time. But sometimes I joke around with my coworkers. I was like, all right, let's do this. 5 times, and then we'll go take a break, or 5 times, and we'll make sure we don't crash. If we don't crash, everybody eats Yahtzee. We got this. And all sorts of fun stuff. Like we can continue on with the rest of our day. And so, just kind of having fun with it, and there will occasionally be I don't want to do one. I was like, I know, I get it, I understand. 2 more times, and then we'll get up and go get a snack, or kind of like short rewards. Kind of is how I like to do it because I'm a dog. I'm very reward centric. I'm very reward centric, and so it's the little things. So like 10, 15 more times, and then I'm like, okay, cool. I'm gonna go get up and I'm gonna walk around, or I'm gonna go get a snack, or I deserve a Rice Krispie treat, and I'll go grab myself a Rice Krispie treat from the break room or something. So that instant gratification is possible if you make the rewards smaller.
That's awesome. I know, like that's something that I kind of apply with my life as well. Like you mentioned, the gamification. Like Katie, you just mentioned, I don't feel like dealing with this, and how that energy can kind of affect your work environment. And something that I like to say is like, I want to get a new high score. I understand that this person is this way. How much can I tolerate before it starts to irritate me, right? And so each time I do a little bit better, and I call that getting a new high score, and then I'll reward myself, like you mentioned, take a break, go for a walk, stuff like that. So that's really cool.
It's definitely a lot of fun.
And like I love the examples that both of you gave, and that's just making me think of even more how I can implement things like time limits, right? Because in video games, you got time limits or high scores, or things like there's certain games where they encourage the team aspect of it, where everybody has to contribute a certain their certain skill set to get something done. So wow, thank you for giving me so many awesome ideas to take to my workplace.
Like my favorite part is when one of our other testers will find like some random, just like nobody else would have thought this way to do this one thing to get a bug, and I just look at him, I'm like, you need to stop playing the game. You can't do this anymore. We're done. I just jokingly was like, you finished, you got it, you good. Just go home. And I just joke around with them like that, and it's kind of fun stuff like that. And there's one coworker that I have, really good friend of mine, and I'm just looking at him like, quit breaking the game. Stop it. I know this is your job, but stop it. So I just goof around with them.
That's really cool.
Another question is like, as you're playing games now, what's your experience now that you have the tester mindset? Does that affect how you play games, when you're supposed to be playing them for fun?
Yeah, it also kind of affects the way I watch movies with any 3D too. Did you know that there's a teeny tiny triangle, black triangle on Yoda's head for Star Wars, I think it's Revenge of the Sith. When he talks, it just, the seams on his head just open up, and there's this tiny triangle right by his ear.
Oh man, I gotta rewatch that now.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's just like you start looking at things, and you don't realize you're doing it until you're just like, oh hey, that's a bug, and then you're like, I should be playing this game for fun, but it's a bug. what should I do? And there have been multiple times where I like Cyberpunk 2077 was a real bad one for me. And my husband and I were playing together. And don't get me wrong, the game was fun for, the time that I played it, but there were so many issues because I was playing on PS4. I was one of those unlucky people. And there were times where I'm just like, I'm going through everything, and my husband's behind me playing on PC. And I'm just like, well, this is a bug, and this is a bug, and this is a bug. And he just looks at me, he's like, Katie, you're not at work. I was like, I know, but there's an issue. He's like, you're not at work. Stop it. I was like, fine. So because I'm so dedicated to my job, I go a little overboard. So yeah, it's really nice to have someone who's not quite yet in the game industry, or someone who's not in the industry kind of reset you as you're playing through games, because after one or two times, if it's a real bad night, 3 for me, of that, hey, you're not at work, you can play this and just enjoy it, is really helpful. And if you don't have that, just constantly like reminding yourself, hey, you're not at work. You are allowed to enjoy this and not bug it. It's okay. So having that constant reminder, it happens. It's going to happen. It's the nature of QA. It's the nature of being a tester. So I think as soon as you kind of like get to a good spot, you can actually just be okay. And there is a lull. Well, at least there was for me. And I've seen it occasionally with a couple of my coworkers, where you come in being a heavy gamer and play games for 8 hours all day long for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. And then at one point you're just like, I don't want to play another video game. Mm-hmm. I don't want to play another video game. I don't want to look at pixels. I don't want to look at 3D. I don't want to do anything. And you just kind of go home, and that's where you develop other hobbies, which I think is very, very nice and very useful, because other hobbies that don't require a screen or don't require a controller or a keyboard or a mouse or anything like that, I think is very useful for testers, because it grounds you a little bit more, and it makes sure that you find a center, and then you do eventually go back to video games. Like for me, I kind of stopped for a little while drawing because it was all digital for me. And I was like learning how to use my digital tablet and everything like that. And it just got to a point where I'm just like, I need space from electronics, from everything. Like I need space. And so I picked up printmaking again. And I took printmaking in college. And it was something that I really enjoyed, but it's a very tactile thing. And now I've been able to come back to drawing and back to digital art and everything like that. And I think it's helped me improve my own art and my own enjoyment for video games as well. And I just picked up a League, like out of nowhere. My coworkers, my friends are just like, hey, you want to play League? I was like, sure, I've never done it. I love suffering. So yeah, but you end up wanting to play more and more because you want to see more of what's out there and how, they could have fixed a thing if you come across it or anything like that. So there is a lull that happens with testers, but as long as you find a way to kind of like separate yourself, I think that's good too.
I'm so glad you brought that up. And for those of you guys listening out there, that's definitely, spoiler alert, not just a tester issue. Any professional experience is that, right? Like I work in the music and the tech space. So when I'm driving, I live in LA, I listen to podcasts. I don't like always listening to music all the time. Or like you said, like I mentioned before, I do a lot of QA myself at work, just kind of the nature of the job when working on our apps and stuff like that. Something that I like to do is like I'll work out, hang out with friends, something that keeps my mind off of it. Or I really enjoy watching like TV series. That's one of my favorite pastimes now, especially like going on Netflix, finding something that has a couple seasons. Because playing video games, like it really does bring you back to work sometimes. So that kind of really goes in line with that whole work-life balance thing, right? You got to develop your hobbies and make sure you're balancing all that stuff out. So I'm so glad that you touched on that.
That I could help.
And I know that one of your passions is concept art and wanting to do that professionally. Tell me what are your like your long-term goals and like what things that you're doing now to get there?
So I long-term want to be a creature and concept artist. Like that is what I want to do. I want to create characters. I want to create creatures, cute, adorable, gross. I want to create things that the player will interact with. And so my long-term goal is to get to that position. And I've been working towards it for, the past 3-4 years. And what I've been doing since then is just creating. I literally create almost 24/7. If I'm not drawing, I'm thinking about drawing. If I'm not thinking about drawing, I'm writing down ideas for drawings. I'm doing research. I'm actually currently working on a character right now that I'm very, very proud of. And it is a character for a D&D one-shot campaign that I may be doing with my friends sometime this next coming month. And I've gone overboard. I've jumped off the deep end. I was so excited and so passionate about the character that I decided to do this is character 1 in plainclothes. This is character 2 in plainclothes. This is character 3 in, the battle vestments and everything. And I've created the whole backstory for the character. So I just create. I constantly create. And then if I'm not doing that, I'm learning. I'm realizing that art cannot exist in a vacuum. Because in college, when I was going to Texas A&M Corpus as a fine arts major, I had people to bounce ideas off of. I had people to critique my work on a semi-regular basis. But as soon as I got to ATech, because they didn't have a concept art track, and everything was all assignment based, I didn't really have that critique atmosphere for me. And so I kind of stopped learning for a while, which in all honesty, I think if you stop learning, it's not a good thing, because you stop progressing. And so for a while, I stopped progressing. So I'm relearning how to take critiques without taking it emotionally or personally. And I'm also just kind of getting a refresher for the processes and the different programs that I use. So I'm currently taking a Photoshop refresher course. It is currently the bane of my existence right now because I am very bad at time management, which is another thing everybody should be much better at it than I am, is time management, because I am terrible at it. It takes me 10-20 minutes to get home, and then everything flies by in the blink of an eye, and then it's 11 o'clock and I have to go to bed. But yes, so I am constantly trying to get better in my crafts, get better with the programs that I use so that I don't fall behind, and so that I'm also constantly learning and I'm getting better. And I think it does show, because every single character that I've ever created since 2017 is newer, better, more evolved, more, more improved, and it shows. So that's pretty much what I've been doing, is I'm relearning how to never stop learning.
So I have a question kind of related to that. Our core audience is primarily people that are maybe recent college grads or want to get into the industry. And I know that one issue can be kind of information overload. So can you kind of share some of your favorite content creators, favorite YouTube videos, or favorite courses that you like to follow for specifically for art and concept art and stuff like that?
Yeah, of course. So I'm a huge fan of Mark Burnett. He is a former character designer for Blizzard, and he's got a lot of really, really great content. He also does a weekly live stream with his Patreon followers that he goes through portfolio reviews, and he does daily sketch dumps and everybody's sketches at the same time and everything. It's really, really good. And on top of that, I also listen to Adam Duffield. Sorry, I think it's Adam Duff. Adam. Anyway, it's Lucid Pixels on YouTube. Really, really great guy. He not only talks about being a concept artist and being in the industry as a concept artist, but he also talks about the emotional aspects of being an artist in the concept art world. And for me, I feel like since I have found his channel, I have emotionally matured as an artist, because he does delve into the, whole imposter syndrome and that of, not feeling worthy or anything like that. And it's really, really important to kind of wrangle those beasts as an artist, just a little bit, because it helps you identify it and how to kind of overcome it.
That is really cool. And so we have to say ask questions, Steve.
No, like go ahead. I've got more, but go for it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that we are actually nearing the end of the podcast. We're at the hour. I don't want to keep you much longer than you kind of agreed to. So are there any kind of, I guess, parting words of advice that you give to people that want to get into the industry? Maybe some things that they can do now while they're still in school. And then also, if you're willing to share like your social media links, like LinkedIn, Instagram, whatever else you're on. I know there's like ArtStation specifically for artists and stuff like that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, definitely. So my biggest piece of advice is to make sure that you take care of yourself. Because without you, your art doesn't exist. Without you, your testing doesn't exist. So take care of yourself. Be that mentally, be that physically, be that, just make sure you take care of yourself at work. Please take care of yourself because that is the most important thing. If you're trying to get into the industry, anytime that you go to E3 or a video game fan expo or anything like that, just keep in mind that they're people too. They're just as excited to be there as you are, but you'll catch more flies with honey than you will with vinegar. So definitely come to them and be like, hey, what's it like working there? Can you tell me what you enjoy most about working at X Studio? Be it Square Enix, be it Gearbox, be it, Rockstar or anything. Get their opinion. Let them tell you what their favorite things are before you tell them what your favorite things are. On top of that, make sure you take breaks. Breaks are very, very important. I'm very bad about it, and so I should know. Make sure you take breaks. Always keep learning. Always keep learning. Just because you graduated college doesn't mean that the learning has stopped. There are millions of resources on the internet. There's Control Paint, which is the classes that I'm working through right now. You've got Muddy Colors, which I just recently learned about. And then there's a whole world out there. We live in the technology age, and information is just at your fingertips. So definitely take a look into anything and everything that you can. I think that's pretty much it. Other than that, if you guys want to hit me up on my Instagram, you can find me at KT of York. That's KTEA of York. And that goes the same for my ArtStation as well as my LinkedIn. Yes, I like tea. I just recently got a TikTok. I'm going to be posting stuff a little bit more regularly. I just realized that, hey, TikTok's a good space to market in. So yeah, you can reach me there. I'm always up for a good chat. If anybody wants to ask me about my opinions about being a QA tester or anything else, I'm always free. So please reach out to me. Just don't be feral.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. Thank you for agreeing to come on to the podcast, Katie. And thanks you guys for actually listening to the podcast. And this kind of concludes this episode of the EmpowerUp podcast.